Thank you to Delete Me for sponsoring today's video. Let's head over to the Red Sea where we have some hot naval action going on right now. The U.S. Navy destroyer USS Carney is laying down some punishment while underway in the Red Sea because some cruise missile launches were detected coming out of Yemen. Now, the interesting thing about this detection is it wasn't just the ship. It was our integrated air defense system that we've built in that theater that also detected it. This complex network of sensors, weapon systems is working together. And last week, our integrated air defense in the Middle East detected 3 cruise missile launches. They were tracked heading north into Saudi Arabia, and which meant they could also land in Egypt, Jordan, Israel, Gaza, any of those countries there. So the missile classification was an Iranian Quds-2 land attack cruise missile. They were able to make that identification. They referenced the rules of engagement and made a decision to engage the targets. Now, there were multiple platforms in the theater capable of destroying these subsonic cruise missiles. Aircraft from an undisclosed airbase in Southeast Asia were in the air and could move to intercept, but that would take precious time in airspace management. Another platform that could engage the targets was the USS Carney and their SM-2 missiles. So the U.S. Carney shot a volley of at least 3 SM-2 missiles and intercepted all 3 targets at a range exceeding 40 nautical miles. These SM-2 missiles were shot in a lag line of sight, which means from the rear, from behind, catching up to it. And that is a more difficult intercept because of the geometry. But the Aegis combat system and the Raytheon RTX SM-2 missile made it happen. So this is the Iranian Quds-2 cruise missile. All 3 of these Iranian missiles were blown to kingdom come by the SM-2 missiles, and there's more. This is an Iranian drone. 8 of these were launched with the cruise missiles. Again, the United States Air Force had fighters in the air that could have intercepted these drones, but a decision was made to maintain the launch basket open for the USS Carney, who continued to hammer these things out of the air with SM-2 missiles, destroying all 8 drones. Just like I want you to destroy your personal identifiable information with today's sponsor, Delete Me. There was a time many, many years ago, and the long ago, when phone companies would send out hefty tomes of personal information about you and everyone in your city to every other person in your city. It was called a phone book, and it was a mammoth paperback that listed your full name, address, phone number, all in alphabetical order. So anyone who knew your name could look up where you lived and maybe pay you a visit if they're a psychopath YouTube TikToker. The 21st century social media, government websites, and public service records all have much more information on you and your family, ironically often updated by the victims themselves. For example, have you ever filled out a fun survey online? Who's your favorite actor? Or did you actually send DNA to an unknown company that would get back to you with an ancestry that was probably AI generated so grandmama could believe she's 10% Cherokee? Listen, social media companies know so much about us because we tell them every day. That's when player 2 enters the game here. Let me introduce you to the data broker. Data brokers are corporations that collect huge amounts of data of your PII, your personal identifiable information, and put them into packages called listings or profiles. They then sell these profiles to player 3, which are service websites. Service websites then charge a premium monthly access or subscription fee to access details about your information. So let me show you what happened to me. This was a real story of what happened to me. These service websites, these knuckleheads paid a data broker to go through my social media, and probably millions of other people too, to get public record information, government website information, and they built a profile on me, including where I was born, all the addresses that I've ever lived at, and being in the Navy, I've lived at a lot. They had every single one of them, and all my family members as well, and that was really concerning. They had their street addresses as well as mine, their email addresses, mine, and much, much more, and made it all available to everyone if they paid a fee. So if you had a credit card, you could find out where I live and do what you will with that information. That's why I use Delete Me. This is my personalized private protection program. This is the cover of it. Delete Me is a hands-free service that removes your personal information that is sold online. So Delete Me contacts dozens of PII broker websites, just like these, that have your data, and they have your data purged legally. This is a formal, legal, documented process with limited power of attorney. This isn't a simple email request. This is a legal proceedings that they go through with each of these companies to get your data removed permanently. Delete Me then monitors these sites into the future, so if your data reappears again, they have it removed again, and they'll continue to monitor that. Delete Me generates a report of all the sites that were selling your information and all the data that was there that's been scrubbed. So I personally use Delete Me, and I think anyone who uses social media or used any kind of DNA ancestry service should use it as well. So click the link in the description and use the code subbrief20 to get 20% off all plans. Let's head over to the Second Thomas Shoal, an atoll in the Spratly Island chain in the South China Sea, where the Chinese Coast Guard is attempting to shipwreck civilians. Credit to Naval News journalist Geoffrey Maitem for breaking the story on Sunday. Local time in the Philippines, a civilian vessel that you see here, the UA's May 2, was deliberately rammed while performing a resupply to deliver food and water to Marines on the Second Thomas Shoal outpost. This video shows the small vessel evading the large Coast Guard vessel when the ship accelerates into the side of the small boat, striking it. Clearly, this is dangerous and unnecessary. The Chinese Coast Guard is behaving in ways that endanger civilian lives instead of protecting them. So, credit to our partners in the Indo-Pacific region, and we have near continuous surveillance assets all over the South China Sea now, both in UAVs and cameras like this. So when things like this happen, we'll have video evidence for you, and we'll bring it to you every single time in an effort to minimize or stop this kind of behavior from the Chinese Coast Guard. This is dangerous. All right, let's keep our focus on China for now. Let's move up to the Bohai Sea. Most of you may not even know about this body of water, but it's this very important small littoral body of water that's bordered by North Korea on one side and China on the other. China has been using this littoral water for their ballistic missile submarine deployments because it's very close to their own support facilities. It's very hard for the Americans to get to them, and so it's very easy for them to hide nuclear weapons on board submarines in this area. So the geography here is working in their favor of the home team. These are the Jin class, or the nuclear submarines that are being deployed there. This is not a new tactic, but what is new is they're doing the same thing down south now. Let's take a look down at Hainan Island, where China is building or continuing to improve its largest submarine base. China continues to improve their infrastructure at Yalong Naval Base. Here are surveillance photos of the new waterfront construction. This combination of increased presence in the South China Sea suggests that China will be using the South China Sea as a deep water bastion for one or two of its ballistic missile submarines, the way they use the Bohai Sea as a confined littoral water bastion. So my opinion is that China is going to begin concurrent bastion defenses, which will be effective if allowed to proceed. That means they'll have one or two ballistic missiles up north in the Bohai Sea, one or two of the other ballistic missile submarines in the South China Sea. Not necessarily at the same time, so the United States will have to expend resources figuring out which one's at sea and where. Now, everything in red on this map of the South China Sea is either a Chinese outpost or a Chinese outpost and airfield. And ever since 2018, People's Republic of China has occupied Spratly Island outposts and have been equipping them with advanced anti-ship missiles, anti-aircraft missile systems, military jamming equipment that represents the most capable land-based weapon systems deployed by any claimant in the disputed South China Sea. In mid-2021, the PLA deployed an intelligence gathering ship and surveillance aircraft to the Spratly Islands during a U.S.-Australian bilateral operation in the region. From early 2018 through 2022, the PRC regularly used the Spratly Islands outpost to support naval and Coast Guard operations in the South China Sea, much like the one we've shown you here earlier. The PRC has added more than 3,200 acres of land to 7 features in the Spratly Islands. They're literally building man-made islands and shoring them up so they don't just dissolve with the next high tide. And then they're putting facilities like we're talking about here today on them. China has added military infrastructure to these islands, including 72 aircraft hangars, docks, satellite communications equipment, antenna arrays, radars, and hardened shelters for missile platforms onto these man-made islands in the in the Spratly Island chain and the South China Sea in general. This is the naval equivalent of boots on the ground, because with these man-made islands and troops and equipment on that small island, they have a zone of control that they can protect or be offensive with their weapon systems. So this is a land-based defense for their ballistic missile submarines that will be operating, I believe, in the waters around these man-made islands. Now, who's taking care of the air domain? Securing the air domain is very important, and for the South China Sea, it's being supported by the largest aviation force in the Indo-Pacific region. This is the PLAAF, that's People Liberation Army Air Force, and they're rapidly catching Western air forces in terms of capability. They're modernizing with deliveries of domestically built aircraft and a wide range of unmanned aerial systems. They have their own UAVs over this area as well. The Chinese Air Force and Navy together combined are about 3,500 aircraft. About 1,900 of those fall into the fighter category, and dozens are long-range bombers with nuclear anti-ship capability, which is a threat to our Navy, obviously. In October 2019, the PRC signaled the return of the airborne leg of its nuclear triad after the PLAAF publicly revealed the H-6N, its first nuclear-capable air-to-air refuelable bomber, which means it can stay aloft for extended periods of time by simply refueling itself, keeping nuclear weapons in a strike position airborne at all times if it chooses to. These are just some of the capabilities China has that must be considered before interfering in a Coast Guard ship ramming a civilian boat. Things can escalate quickly here to a point very few people understand. All of this could be avoided if China would simply operate within international norms, recognize freedom of navigation in international waters, and respect the rule of law at sea like every other sailor does by tradition, regardless of nation. It's not too late. China can begin doing this today. I remain hopeful that cooler heads will prevail, but I'm an optimistic person. What I want to know from you, am I too much sunshine and rainbows and unicorns over here? Is China going to continue to escalate this to the point of conflict? Is that inevitable, or will things change? I don't know, but I have hope that things will calm down. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great one.